From the future back to the present, let's take a look at whether a board role is in your future. And the trick with this is really finding the fit that's right for you. Why do you want to join a board? That's a reflection question. Nobody can answer that but you. If you think it's in your future, what's the best role for you? Nobody can answer that one without a little guidance maybe, but that's your question. And what's your appetite for risk? If it's low, you don't want a public board seat. If it's high, you might be okay with that. How do you add the most value? How do you differentiate yourself so you win the seat? And what style do you bring to the group? Now, I want to talk a little bit about style because that's a new definition that we're working with. It is not the same as the diversity push that has to do with whether you wear a skirt or whether you wear slacks, which is the push right now on gender or ethnicity, which is the alternative. Many companies are looking at that as a push. We believe, as we've looked at it, that the style of thinking, the difference in the style of thinking is the diversity that you want. And this is based on a thundering amount of research that we have invested 4 years of our time in to say ideation is a function of differences in style of thinking and orientation. And we have at least calculated 4 different styles based on research in 32 countries of executives and directors. The 4 orientations are biases towards action, process, strategy, or people. Now this is just naturally how you solve problems. So if I were to put you in small teams and give you an issue and you debated it and we had the same problem, you'd all come up with different answers because the orientation to how you solve the problem differs by this. Now what we've done with that is run some analysis to say, how does that play out when you sit in the boardroom? And as a function of that, if you know your governance style, it plays out to 10 possible styles. 5 healthy ones and 5 that are in the shadow side. Now we may have a strong style and under stress produce the shadow side. We could also just be thoroughly dysfunctional and only show the shadow side. And in the 4 years that we've been doing this, I've only run into 2. Those were really interesting coaching assignments. Now, the styles, we typically have a dominant one. We might have a A-B style, but it's important to know where you sit because what you bring to the table plays out differently. And the styles are unifier, advisor, expert, challenger, or change driver, or a statesperson. Now each of those brings a different value to the table. They're all good. They're just a little different in what they bring. So a unifier is somebody who is very conscientious to the ethics and the norms and the full engagement of people. They're very good listeners and they're very careful to make sure the reticent people are bringing up what they need to bring up. The challengers are the people who love to hear themselves talk and they bring up a lot of ideas and they're very, not ideas about the solution, ideas of what needs to be solved. And they raise the bar on standards and expectations. And then when people say, well, great, how are we going to fix it? I don't know. They turn to the change driver. So you fix it. You got 32 ideas before breakfast. So the change drivers are the ideation creative people. And then the advisor experts tend to be the typical people who have deep domain knowledge, a lawyer, an accountant, somebody who's a forensics person who knows their stuff. Each one of these brings something to the table. The statesperson happens to be one who has an equal balance of all of them. So they become extremely good candidates to be the chair of the board or at least a chair of a committee because they can mediate where other expertise may not be communicating particularly well. So a natural leader who sits in that chair is very well suited and typically is retained for a long period of time because they're gifted at that. And they can bring the group to a discussion and a closure on a topic. Now, if you go to the dark side of that, you overcompensate. Every strength is also its weakness. So if you are a unifier, as an example, the downside of that is because you're so good at creating harmony for the group to get to closure, you may sacrifice a belief that you have. You know, the group may debate hostily on something and finally land on a decision, and there's something about that decision that's just nagging the back of your head. But for the sake of the harmony of the group, you shut up. Well, that's not good, because that one little nagging thing, if you put it on the table, forces the group to think higher on how to resolve that, and the ideation and the solution goes up. So if you're quiet, you've underserved. So a lot of what we do is look at this and cause people to think about walking behind yourself so that you know your strong suit, and where you might be vulnerable so that you check yourself and course correct. And every one of these styles has a plus and something to watch for on your shadow side. And when we go through these assessments and take a look at it, it's a way of modeling it. It's also a great way to know where you belong. If you are going to go into a boardroom where there are 6 members and 5 of them are challengers, and guess what, you are too, are you adding much value? No. You're creating a social club, and that doesn't work. So it's a way for you, who is equally responsible to screen for good fit as is the committee, to say, I belong here or I don't belong here.
You know, I get asked about culture, and should that be a factor in board recruitment? And I think there's some overthink when it comes to that, because there's nothing wrong with having the pesky nitpicker on the board, and there's nothing wrong with having the run silent, run deep personality on the board. What's important is to have a good mix of those, so that you know that the issues are going to be covered from various perspectives. And that may not be the culture that someone has in mind when they say they have to fit in with our culture. Usually that's sort of a code word for they have to be willing to come in and go along. And of course we don't want that. We actually want to hear the challenges, because that's how we get to the best answer. People ask me, what makes a great board member? And that's an easy one. You have to be likable, but everybody in the room has to know that you're not there to be liked. Okay, and then the next question is, well, what do you mean by that? Well, you have to be respectful. You have to be able to work within a group. You have to have patience. You have to be slow to speak, fast to listen, and then very slow to anger. If you can do that, then you can cover the likable side. And then as far as making sure that everyone knows you're not there to be liked, well, you just have to be your own person. You have to pull up to the table as a representative of the constituency that you're there for. So in a corporation, it would be the shareholders. And you have to be determined that that's the paramount concern that you're bringing to the table. And sometimes you won't agree. And sometimes there's not going to be a unanimous vote.
What can you do if you want to be a great director? Certainly you want to set a plan for yourself and have some realistic expectations. You have to network like crazy. You have to understand the nominating and the governance committee process and how they go through looking at candidates. You have to know the skills that you need to develop, let alone the ones you already have, and you have to match those skills against what the board needs are. We have the privilege today to have 3 guests here that are going to talk a little bit about some things you could do to take advantage of resources that are available to do this personal action plan. And we're going to start with Marilyn Nagel, who is the CEO of Watermark, to talk a little bit about programs available. Marilyn?
Thank you, Donna. We all like to prepare for something new that we're doing, whether it's taking a cooking class, which I should do, or learning how to pick out wines. I live in wine country. Or if this is something that you want to do, you decide you want to serve on a board, then one of the things that you may want to do is take some kind of a course that helps you assess what type of board you might want to sit on, what are the skills that you might need to build, what are some of the governance elements that you need to learn. And there is a variety of programs out there that help you build that learning, build that sense of confidence, so that when you walk into a boardroom, when you do get that first seat, you are prepared and you're ready to make a valuable contribution to the board. One of those types of programs we have at Watermark, And I can talk at length about that, but I won't. I'll just give you a few of the elements of our program as compared to some of the other programs out there, but there are a variety of them. Some focus on governance. There are several at universities that are great in terms of understanding both governance for US-based companies and the more global-based companies. And some of them, like the Watermark program, are really geared toward helping you get that first seat. Because as Donna mentioned, the challenge is getting your first seat on a board. If you haven't served on a board and you're not a sitting CEO of a company, that's the biggest hurdle to get over. So what we do in our program, and there are many other programs that do similar things, is we start with the assessment to understand what is your style, how does that fit with, and how can you position yourself for a board opportunity. So we start with the board bona fide assessment. You understand your style, and then you meet with a coach, and that coach helps you interpret what your assessment does, and the coach also helps you write a board bio, which is different than your resume. People think, wow, this is just like getting a job, and I talk about I spent 5 years here and 3 years there. But if you don't talk about did I have P&L experience and things that the board is looking for, you're not necessarily going to position yourself properly. We also do courses on governance, sessions that really prepare you so that when you are sitting on a board, you can be the best contributing member of that board. And I go back to my notion of a cooking class. Before you start making that souffle, before you begin, you really need to understand what are the necessary ingredients that you need to have. Do you need to know about fiduciary responsibility? Do you need to know about governance? Do you need to know how to get your board bio ready? Do you need to meet with a board recruiter? Do you know people in your network, or do you need to expand your network so that you're ready to get out there and put your plan in place to get that first board seat? So programs like Watermarks, programs that many, many organizations offer, are going to help you achieve your goal of getting on a board.
Thank you, Marilyn. And now we'd like to hear from Don Townsend, who is CEO of Donley Townsend and has done many board placements and has done executive recruiting for boards for years. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. I sat in the audience and I listened to Donna as we went through this about governance all around the world, and the thought occurred to me that I'm sure glad I'm not on any boards anymore, because I can't keep up with all of it. But I'm always glad that there are many people who want to serve on boards. Donna mentioned that part of my work is recruiting directors, and most of that is for medium-sized publicly traded companies. And I've been doing that for a number of years, and I've helped a number of people get on boards for the first time through that. But I've also had a chance to talk to a lot of directors and a lot of CEOs and a lot of nominating committee people. And as a result of that, I've formed some views about how do you go about getting on a board if that's what you really want to do. There are a lot of organizations like Watermark and Board Prospects that can help you. There are a lot of university programs that can help you learn what you need to know. But I think often what's missing is the introspection. Taking the time to really understand where you fit as a director, what kind of board you want to be on, and where are you uniquely qualified. Because my guess is that for everybody in the audience here today who wants to be on a board, there are probably there's a small number of organizations for whom you would be a great director. And they would love to have you on their board if they only knew you. Now, the trick is to understand who those organizations are. Where are the companies that would really like to have you as a director, and where you could make a tremendous contribution as a director. Now, I like to go on and say, often when we think about those things, we think about our executive background. We think about ourselves as a manager, as a leader. But often, there's a counterintuitive piece to this. Often it's some other aspect of your background, not just your executive experience, that is uniquely valuable as a director. Now, I'm from Texas, and so we always think about and talk about the oil industry. I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine decided he wanted to be on a board. And he thought about his background. Now, his whole life had been spent on the refining and marketing side of the oil industry. He was a deep expert on what to do with crude oil after it's at the refinery and where it goes downstream after that. So, as he thought about it, he realized that as an executive, he was always going to be most valuable in refining and marketing. But as a director, it was just the opposite. As a director, he was most valuable on what's called the upstream side, exploration and production, because he represented the voice of the customer. And so he went out and he wrote to exploration and production companies, companies that find oil, get it out of the ground, and then sell it to somebody else because they don't have their own refining and marketing arms. And he said, here's who I am, this is my background, I want to be a director, I think I'd be valuable on your board. And within 90 days, he was on one board, and he had an invitation to be on the board of a second exploration and production company. Now, obviously, that's an example of somebody who had a great background. But what I'm getting at is understanding where you're uniquely valuable as a director. And it's not always where you would think you're most valuable when you just look at your resume of your executive achievements and your executive expertise. The other thing I would say is don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to tell the companies that you think that you would be uniquely valuable to about yourself. There's nothing wrong with bringing yourself to the attention of a nominating committee. And if you look, almost every organization these days has posted on their website what their nominating process is, even publicly traded companies. For the most part, they post their nominating process on their website. So take advantage certainly of all the resources like Board Prospects and Watermark and the educational opportunities that are available to you so that you have the skills and you know what you need to know in order to take on the risks of being on a board. But also understand at a really granular level where you're the most valuable as a director. And then if you really want to be a director, don't hesitate to take the initiative yourself. Waiting on a recruiter, that's like waiting on a lightning strike. It might happen, but the odds are against it. There's nothing wrong with taking the initiative yourself to put yourself on the board that you want to be on. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Don. And now we'd like to hear from Mark Rogers, who is CEO of Board Prospects. Thank you.
Several years ago, I was a practicing corporate attorney. And one day, the managing director, managing partner of the firm came to me and said, listen, we want you to get involved in board service as a way of business development. I thought, okay, it'll be simple, I'll go ahead and do that. I quickly learned a few things. One, it's not that simple. Two, I couldn't find any resources to help me identify board opportunities. And three, there was a substantial number of people who were in exactly my position looking for board opportunities but couldn't find a place where they were identified. Now, as Donna mentioned, as you break into board service as a newbie, they first place you on a nominating/governance committee role. I did eventually break into board service, and of course I was slotted into a nominating/governance committee role. And I quickly learned something, and that's that when you're there, the recruitment process seemed a bit outdated. It's rooted in many ways in this who do you know conversation that happens around the boardroom table. And I thought, this doesn't seem to make sense, because I saw the frustrations they were having and we were having as committee members in identifying candidates. And I knew something from the time when I was looking for board opportunities, that there were so many people out there. They just didn't have a place where they could raise their hand. So I left the practice of law to form boardprospects.com. The idea is I'm bringing both sides of the table together. On one hand, I allow individuals to come in, create a profile, raise their hand and say, here is my value proposition to a board of directors. On the other side of the table, we have corporations come in, they create a profile, nonprofit, private, public, municipal, and they say, this is what we're looking for. This is the criteria we're looking for. And the two sides can find each other for the purpose of potential boardroom recruitment. In addition, we also serve as a resource. We have boardroom news, corporate governance news, updated throughout the day. We have blogs. We have educational opportunities. We want to act as a resource to improve board service and to really transform the boardroom recruitment process. So I would encourage you all to join boardprospects.com. It's a free resource, and it's a way that you can effectively and discreetly promote yourself for board service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I want to just add a little element here for those of you who are looking at this idea that everyone's talking about on how do you differentiate yourself and take advantage of that to distinguish yourself for a seat. The diversity initiative is a hot topic right now, and many of you will fit within that either because of gender or because of age or something unique that's going on. And what's important to know about this is around the globe we know diversity is good, but take a look at that chart. We're not there yet. So there's a lot of opportunity to fill that void. Now, the reasons we're not there yet are odd, and we're discovering those. While everybody's talking about diversity is good and we want it, it's not happening. Why is that true? Some of that has to do with the fact that while people say it's good and we ask for it, we don't know how to manage it very well. And some of that's tied to the psychology of directors today, or people who aren't even directors if you look at it at the management level. We know that business, the currency of business is trust. And trust is hard to come by when you're working with strangers. And in boards, you're meeting very irregularly. They're episodic teams. They meet 4 to 6 times a year. It takes years before you really know your partners that are sitting at that table. It's not like every day when you're working with management, you know the hot buttons. You really have to take the time to learn each other. And unconsciously, we are not wired, our brains are not wired for working with people we don't trust. We're still cavemen in corporate suits, and we like to stay with clubs of people we understand. So when we invite diversity into the room, we're a little bit on guard. And we're not sure psychologically that the value of the work associated with working with people we don't know is worth the trouble. So it's easier to just say, let's hang with people that are likable, that we all know each other, and the club will work fine. Now, likability is an important thing, but that's really translated to diplomacy skills, to have the maturity to work with people that we know aren't like us. And that's one of the new skills that's required to be a good director.
Well, diversity comes in many forms. What I found, I had a diverse management group and probably a gender and ethnicity perspective, but I found we weren't very diverse in thought, that we all thought the same way, and that I really would like diversity of thought at a board, as well as diversity of gender and ethnicity. And for international companies, I believe we should have international board members who can give us a sense of the flavor of the countries in which we're doing business, and some better and different geopolitical perspectives as well.
Diversity of leadership teams, whether it's a board or a senior leadership team, is incredibly important. And the reason it's important is if you have a group of people who all bring the same perspective and the same, set of experiences and the same general outlook on things, you will miss critical issues. You just will. And so I always look for to be part of a diverse group, because you're going to make so much better decisions. And I see it, I certainly see it on the corporate boards that I serve on, and I certainly see it in terms of my own senior leadership team. Over and over again, there'll be, there might be 5 out of 7 people who are sort of seeing things one way, and then one person will sort of come at it from a different direction. You're sort of going, like the light bulb goes on, you sort of go like, oops, all right, we weren't thinking about that. We need to think about this. This is really important. So, you could have a room full of white males who have very diverse experiences. My experience has been that it really helps to have some women in the room as well. It helps to have people of color in the room, because almost certainly, especially in the tech industry, if you're female or if you're African American or Hispanic, you've had a different set of life experiences getting to where you are. You just have. And I think that that's very helpful.
So if we do know that diversity is part of this and we have to push it, we need to build a next generation director. And those people have to be purposefully recruited with the wisdom to be able to build social trust so that the directors can work well together. And that means having these skills to integrate people into a team, have the influence to create dialogue in a fair and authentic way when we think differently, that we can be impactful to get action as a result of that, and that diplomacy skill moves the group forward. And we have to invest more time to get to know each other. We can't just assume that 2 years from now we'll finally know each other. You have to, outside of the boardroom meetings, take the time to call each other up, have lunch, do whatever it takes to get that trampoline underneath the system. Now, another thing that's being looked at today is how do we articulate the skills of the next generation director? And this is a host of things that you can probably take home and study for yourself in reflection to Don's point. Am I the wisdom of the future? And if I'm not, how do I go get that wisdom so that I am the director to die for? That's what we look for. So getting started is taking a sharp look at yourself, getting some resources and support for a personal action plan, building up your board bio so that you're distinguished and differentiated from other people. Get trained so you're armed and informed, so you can be smart and ready. Network, 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 network. Have I said it enough? Network. And then make yourself available. Let people know. And start your discovery interviews with directors and people that have already done it to see where else you might get some angles, experiences, and hooks that will help you. And then sign up and affiliate with social networks. Hang with directors. Some of the best opportunities come from directors who know of opportunities that nobody else knows about.